Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. I know I said I wouldn't be on a long break for this one, but whoopsie doodle, here we are. I'd apologise, but this book is long, and these things take time, so here we are. I've been meaning to read this book for a while, actually, and one of the things that has kept me away from it is the sheer size of it. It's about 600 pages, which is probably about twice the length of anything I usually read, but I got myself the audiobook to go alongside it, which is 19 and a half hours at normal speed, by the way, but I was switching between 1.5 and 1.75 depending on how focused my brain was. I wanted to finally commit to it. I do try and get one video out a week, but I was like, no, this will take as long as it needs to take. I want to finally read it. And this book in question, as you may have seen in the thumbnail, is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth, and the audiobook reader is Z Sands. Not actually related to any writing stuff, but if you are more of an audiobook person, Sands did an excellent job. There are a couple of places where seeing the book is helpful but not entirely necessary. There's a short chapter with a script which I opted to just read without the audio because I found the reading of each name every time kind of annoying. That's not the narrator's fault, it's just something that grates on me for some reason. I think it's because they were such short lines, so it would be name, read the line for a little bit, name, read the line for a little bit, name, read the line for a little bit, and I'm like, please, I could read this quicker without you doing that. And there's another chapter which is meant to be like an online article with certain words and phrases in the book that are underlined to indicate a hyperlink, but in the audio version, Sans says hyperlink after every one of those words or short phrases, and I know that's useful if you are only listening, but it's also just like, was there not a better way to portray that? It would be like let me read a bit from earlier in my script. The book, hyperlink, in question is, as you, hyperlink, may have seen in the thumbnail hyperlink, Plain Bad Heroines hyperlink by Emily M. Danforth hyperlink. The audiobook hyperlink reader is Z Sands hyperlink. It's read like that, and it's just like, good lord. You do sort of miss out on the effect of the asides done via footnotes in the book, but that's only because there isn't really a distinction between the asides and the main bulk of the text within the audio itself. It might have been nice if they actually said footnote in the way they did with the hyperlinks, but that's okay. And I will say, I actually really like the little asides. I'm very fond of them. I love Terry Pratchett's work, and he's where I was sort of introduced to using little footnotes as asides and that kind of thing, and I think Danforth uses them really well. Now, this review will contain some spoilers, because while I'm not going on like a proper deep dive on it, the end of this book kind of confounded me, and it was so good and so enticing right up to the penultimate chapter where it lost me. And I'd still say I enjoyed the book, but Jesus Christ, did that last load of information leave me just going, what? On repeat. But let's break things down a little so you know what we're working with here. So, we're working in 2 points of time. In the modern day, we're looking at the making of a film based on a book, based on the goings-on at a former school for girls called Brookhorns. The other side of things we see is a direct telling of these events in the late 19th, early 20th century. At this school for girls, a series of tragic events befell the school, resulting in multiple deaths, all of which seem entirely out of the blue and without real explanation. There were already rumours back then that the grounds of the school and nearby schoolmaster's house are on haunted grounds in some way, but I think I explained that badly, but anyway, these mysterious deaths only serve to amplify those rumours, and by the modern day, it is perhaps not surprising that the book telling the story of these people was noticed and picked up by a major horror director called Bo Dillon. Now, this is a deeply queer story. It's especially a sapphic story in all facets, and it was really interesting to see how Danforth explored this in not only different points in time, but with people at different age ranges. And I also want to say that this is not a book that I would say falls into the trope of bury or gays. To me, that isn't just gay people die. It's to serve the purpose of keeping censors and homophobes happy. Those people are not going to be happy with this book, regardless of who lives and who dies. This book is full of tragedy, but that's because it's centered around the supernatural, not to serve any nefarious purpose in regards to the queer community, especially not the sapphic community. Libby Brookhants is the headmistress of the school and has a long-term relationship with Alexander Trills, more commonly referred to as Alex. They've known each other long before the school opened, having known each other since they were in college. Danforth shows a relationship that's hanging on, but maybe not right. They clearly do love and have affection for one another, but are also often snide with each other, with Alex carrying a lot of jealousy and fear that Libby wishes to seek out others. We see the growth of their relationship, even watching it sour at times, and Danforth does such a good job of bringing us a couple who are clearly more than just comfortable in their familiarity with one another. They know each other too well, and to an extent it's bred this feeling of contempt, even if there is still a deep-rooted affection. They are basically an old married couple, and I like that Danforth isn't afraid to show an older queer couple or an established queer couple who are more fleshed out and well-rounded. There can be pressure to show that being queer means you're sort of automatically happier in a super long-term relationship in media, but people are people. In such a supernatural book, these two are perhaps the most grounded and natural part of it. Flo and Clara are a pair of young teenagers at the Brookhants School for Girls. They end up with a copy of a book by a woman named Mary McLean, a real woman, by the way, who does seem to be incredibly fascinating. These two form a group around this book called the Plain Bad Heroines Society. The two of them are clearly more than friends and show that reckless abandon that comes with young love. At first, adults chalk it up to the fact that they're in an all-girls boarding school with no men around, so they're just exploring what any teenager would, and they'll grow out of it by the time they meet a husband, which, frankly, there's a lot to unpack there, not least of all the fact that where this is an all-boys school, I can't imagine the same grace being given to two boys exploring their feelings in the same way. There's also a lot to be said for the fact that these people assume that a husband will fix their latent lesbianism. I know, it was the early 1900s, of course that's what they thought, but there is something still rather laughable in it. But these two encompass that sense of discovery when you're younger, the need to discover yourself and how that may tie into one's sexuality. They revel in their rebellion in some ways, but it's clear that they do not show that rebellion via their feelings for each other. That is not an outward act, but rather something they share in quiet moments, which is kind of where Eleanor Faderman comes in. I won't talk on her long, but her discovery... Hello, something just fell off my desk. No idea. Anyway, her discovery of the two girls' dalliances rather make her question things about herself, but with a complete inability to express these desires. She encompasses the hidden wants and desires of being truly closeted, and I feel her unfortunate end captures that rather well, given its frenzied, self-inflicted nature, feeling rather tortured. Now, bringing this to the modern day, we have two movie stars and the writer whose book said movie is going to be based on. Mira Emmons is the author in the trio. I'm going to be honest, I couldn't get on with this character particularly well. However, that isn't the fault of Danforth in terms of bad writing. I just found that she got on my nerves a little bit. Much of that was intentional. Some of that I don't know that it was. But that's not the point. She wrote the book with the help of a woman named Elaine, or Lainey Brookhants, the now owner of the school grounds as well as the manor house close by. She was only 16 when the book was published, so she feels this incredible amount of pressure still being so young and trying to follow up on its success. To me, she feels very fresh out the closet, though this could be attached to the fact that she's out the closet very publicly now, there's something in her snide defensiveness that has the tinge of baby gay to it. She struggles with being genuine with people, and that does make sense. She's been through a lot at her young age, but she does feel like a really good reflection of the way a lot of people are when they're out in their early days. Maybe she annoys me because I was definitely like that to an extent. That sort of feeling like you have to be on the defensive constantly to justify yourself, and it definitely feels like that with her. Audrey Wells is an actor in the technical sense, but hasn't done a huge amount of major work. Her mother was a famous scream queen back in the day, but did suffer with a breakdown that brought a halt to that side of her career. Audrey gets a role in the film and she's grateful for it, though she knows she's having to make the best of starring in a film where all anyone's going to be talking about is the hot new star in the lead, who we'll get to in a minute. She's originally booked in the role of Eleanor, though a last minute dropout has the director moving her role around, and she ends up instead playing a lead herself, as she'll be playing Clara. Merritt isn't the biggest fan of this decision. It's hard to fully clock why at first. There seems to be some jealousy surrounding her closeness to the other lead, I think, but she also seems to think that Audrey's hesitation and checking in with her co-star that an actual kiss is okay in the chemistry read, thinking that this is some kind of homophobia thing. This is where I really picked up on that fresh out the closet defensiveness thing, but as it happens, Audrey is actually bisexual, so no, she isn't. She's just being decent and making sure everyone is consenting. Audrey's queerness in the story is very casually there. It isn't a point of interest per se, beyond it meaning that it does bring her close to people in ways that you can imagine. She's a young woman who's generally a little too self-conscious and nervous about being in a film with a huge name, especially with certain pressures being put on her by the director and his weird storytelling methods. Audrey is somewhat of a glue for people, and I really like the exploration of the pressure she's put under and how that manifests throughout, but we'll get to that a little bit later because this is mostly talking about sexuality stuff. Harper is our A-lister. She is still new to this, but she has gone on a meteoric rise and has become as much an influencer as she is a Hollywood starlet. She is referred to as a celesbian, which I've never heard before. I never want to hear again, but I won't hold that against Harper. She is Hollywood. She's super enigmatic and endearing in a way that makes you feel like there's something just a little bit off with her. Not that she's completely fake, but it's more like it's clear she has a veil up, and it takes a lot to let anyone see past it. She's out and proud though. She knows her history. She's always interested in learning more, and she is also super in the public eye with everything she does, including her flings with a good number of women. To me, she is what Flo and Clara could be were they in the 21st century. There is a feeling of rebellion with Harper, but just in that sort of, she's kind of cool rather than like punk kind of way, if you know what I mean. Like, though to be fair, from what we see of Libby and Alex's youth, they were rather audacious in their own right, but what I'm getting at is that she has that reckless abandon that Flo and Clara had, but with a permission base that they could never be afforded due to the time they were living in. That doesn't mean things are easy for her in that regard. Harper still has family members that are homophobic, but on the whole, it's still a lot easier in the 21st century than it was in the early 20th. And we haven't even really touched on the horror yet, so shall we do that? Shall we go there? Generally speaking, the horror in this book works so well because it functions by making both the reader and the characters within the book question reality. There is almost always something that could explain things beyond the supernatural, but there is that sinking feeling in your chest of there is definitely something deeper here. With the film set, the biggest reason that Audrey is under a huge amount of pressure is because Bo, the director, has told her that she will be working with him on something a little extra with the film. not only will it be a telling of the happenings at Brookhaunt's, sort of retelling of the book, but there will be some found footage elements behind the scenes as well. Her job is to make sure Hopper and Merrick get to the right place at the right time so Bo can add some extra spook to the place. She is left constantly wondering what is actual haunting and what is Bo's doing, and it kind of drives her mad. And the reader is left as in the dark as she is. As we go through, I do believe that more of it is actual haunting than not, especially with things pertaining to the weather and the yellow jacket wasps. The horror is not the scariest thing in the world, but it fits within the narrative really rather well, and it has a very gothic feel to it, helped I'm sure by the location. But here's the thing. The horror works because of this questioning of what is haunting and what is trickery or sleeplessness or sickness or all manner of possible other explanations. But reader and characters can seek comfort in the idea that it might not be a haunting. It could be a bad trip, it could be lack of sleep, it could be something that Bo set up. But Danforth makes a mistake in the ending. In the second to last chapter, she tries to write an explanation for it all rather than leaving it up to the reader to come up with their own conclusions, or to come to their own conclusions rather. And don't get me wrong, an explanation can sometimes be useful in horror. The cause of a haunting can be as satisfying as a reveal as discovering the criminal in a thriller, but Danforth missed the mark here. There is an old woman introduced here who we've never heard of, but turns out she's incredibly important, and she's linked to this mystic we've met elsewhere, who's related to a weird member of staff in Libby's manor, and this maid is sort of training Libby's daughter in the mystic ways, and it turns out she was the one that tried to warn Alex of the dangers of Brookhaunt's land in an earlier scene, but surely Alex would recognise her because that moment felt kind of pivotal to her. It's all very confusing, and honestly, I thought maybe I was just being a bit dense. Like, maybe I missed something earlier. This is a long book, I easily could have done. So I checked to see what others are saying, and I found a couple of threads on Reddit and other places, and thank God I found out that other people are just as confused as I am. It makes me feel better about myself. The Verretts are the family linked to this old woman, the maid, and the mystic, and it all seems to be a way of getting the land back to them in some way. I think that's what Danforth is aiming at. That's why it's sort of cursed, because it doesn't belong to the people there, it belongs to these women, but I actually feel like I'm reaching with that. And then there is the complete dismissal of Mary MacLane's book throughout every part of the stuff in the early 20th century, late 19th, but especially in the early 20th century, when we're sort of in the era of Flo and Clara's demise and after. Throughout that, it seems like this might be the thing that holds the curse. Again, it's tied to the way the horror works in this book, where you are questioning what power it actually holds and what else could be going on. But it seems like it's not Mary's book in general, but this specific copy that holds something to it. And yet the maid just dismisses this at the end, pretty much laughing at Libby for ever thinking it could hold any kind of power. And frankly, that felt like Danforth laughing at me for thinking the same thing. It felt really kind of like a slap in the face. It was just like, but you've been setting it up this whole time, and now you're just going to, I believe the line was something like, you really think that this book could hold any kind of power? I'm like, yes, because that's what you've been telling us for the entire fucking book. Like, probably about 550 pages by this point, you've been telling us that, and now you're like, I can't believe you actually thought this. That's so stupid. Like, this book held me in its grasp for damn near the entire time, but it unraveled itself by trying to tie things up. This might have even been a somewhat favourite of mine, but that second to last chapter just left a sour taste in my mouth, and the last chapter didn't help me all that much. I'll say this. Still read it for yourself, just to see, if you do have the time. The vast majority of this book is absolutely marvellous, and there's still a chance I was just missing something by the end. If you have read this book, please do let me know how you feel about it as a whole, in particular about the ending down in the comments below. I'm genuinely super interested to know how others feel about this one, because yeah, the ending really... Anyway, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and feel free to ring that notification bell. All the cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.